Today's video is sponsored by NVIDIA Studio. NVIDIA Studio is basically the middleman between content creators and the software and hardware manufacturers, which are making the tools you use on a day-to-day basis. So, for example, Adobe Premiere and After Effects. NVIDIA Studio's primary focus is creating technology which is tailored specifically to help make your job easier. That means creating products that make your workflow faster, more simple, and more professional. I recently made a full video review on the Acer Concept D7 laptop, which uses NVIDIA's new RTX graphics cards, as well as a bunch of new high-end features added specifically for digital creators. That video is chock full of a bunch of info on GPU acceleration, ray tracing, and the overall benefits of using a laptop that is made specifically for doing what we do. So if you are interested, check out the links down in the description. Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. A few days ago, we did the 𝐴𝐶𝐵 floor seats video. If you are interested in that, at the end of this video will be a link if you want to check with this one. So I think a lot of you who are frequent viewers of the channel are really going to benefit from something like this because this is opening a whole new door to a lot of people. Let's go ahead, full screen this, and check out this creative little directed by Jonah Hill, as well as we have the Cactus Jack logo going on there. Now, this could have been done using After Effects tracking, but realistically, they could have just drawn it on the walls in chalk so that they didn't have to do any tracking. It's a cool little wide angle opening shot. You get an establishment of basically all the things that we're going to be seeing throughout the video. You have tons of extras going on. Lamborghini. Now, a lot of people may be asking if this is a 3D model or if this is a physical Lamborghini. My guess is that this is a physical Lamborghini. I think that it may have been annoying to set up some green screen thing just to get everyone look like they're hanging out here. And I'll give you my thoughts a little bit later throughout the video on how they did this kind of melted texture. So like I said, we'll show you how to track text onto the wall within After Effects. Pretty simple, pretty easy. That'll set up the basis for teaching you about 3D tracking, and then we'll use that knowledge of the 3D tracking to show you a lot more. So let's keep playing through here. One thing that I do want to show you, and it's probably going to be the first thing that I do show you, is creating a nice black and white effect the proper way. A lot of people just use the black and white effect in Premiere, or there's a lot of other ways to do it depending on what editing softwares you use. We'll show you how to do that later on. You probably have seen this effect in particular a lot recently because it was featured in that Avengers Infinity War with Thanos snapping his fingers. Everyone just kind of fades away into these dust particles. That's directly inspired from there. They pulled that from there. It's actually pretty easy to pull this off. We will show you that in the tutorial section, but like I said, that comes from Infinity War. Black and white, I like it for the video, and we'll show you how to do that later. So we have some tracking shots here. Once we get into this room, this is where things really start to pick up. So let's play this out. A lot of things kind of just floating around, as well as Travis himself. So let's start off with how Travis is flying himself. To be able to create something like this, you have to have him in a professional studio where you have some sort of rig on his back that'll let him float around. Now, Cinecom, an awesome channel. I'm sure a lot of people watching this have seen Cinecom's tutorials. They're huge. They make some really great content, some really highly produced content. They've made a tutorial on how you can create your own little flying around look like this, inspired by some Harry Styles music video, which I forget the name of. But if you want to see the full step-by-step on that in particular, link to that will be down below. We're not going to talk a lot about that because that requires a lot of setup on the back end. The tutorial part is more directed towards what you can do right now at home by yourself. These I'm almost 90% sure are 3D models. I don't think they're rigging anything out with green screens and trying to get that spin on it. Yeah, sure, maybe they did for a lot of it, but just the movements that they're taking, it kind of looks like there's no gravity, and that's what makes me think that this is 3D model work, especially from this. The simulated particles of these water, we're going to show you how to do that within 3D software, and we're going to show you some cool tips and tricks in general on just creating this sort of look where there's a bunch of crazy elements flying around. More cool stuff going on outside. 3D model here of this helicopter or maybe some sort of green screen clip. You can tell that they composited in. This isn't really lifelike what happens here, but I think it's a cool effect in general. It kind of dips right below the tree line and then you just see this explosion go up. Looks really cool with the 3D track, and with the black and white, I think everything with the 3D just blends a lot better. So I think that may have been a big reasoning for them going with the black and white for this. These birds, these could very much be 3D models. They could very much be real birds. I'm going to go out on a limb and just say that these are also 3D models. Models like this where you have this complex animation. If you are looking to buy an asset like that, that can get pretty expensive depending on what you are trying to get. For a bird, we'll look through prices. We'll give you guys a good estimate later on. I also like how this is all one long shot. So they took this all in one take. There's no cuts going on. They followed him around and they were able to use compositing to make this all really work together. So we come back in here. A lot more of the same of what we were talking about. I really love the slow motion in here for the water and for the actual elements that are flying around. Now this looks a lot like that Thanos scatter where you have those kind of bits of skin flying around, but at a closer look, these are actually little rain water particles. So we'll show you how to do that. I actually made a separate tutorial all on that in the past. They're also using some camera controls just to create some bokeh and match the focusing of the actual camera, which is a great way to create that realism with the CGI. So as we go along, they really just start piling and piling on a lot more crazy CGI. So now we have some furniture flying around. We still have the signature water going out throughout here. This is a nice little 3D track of that cup. So we're going to talk a little bit about matching the environment in 3D so that you can create the most realistic look you can with this 3D. Also, I just want to say this now before a lot of you get intimidated by all the 3D things I'm speaking of. Not only will I show you how to do it in 3D, but I'll also show you some websites where you can just purchase or download free assets, which are very similar to this 3D stuff that's going on. So you won't have the full control as you would if you were creating it in 3D, obviously, but if you're just a Adobe Premiere or After Effects user, I'll point you guys to some useful places where you can find some easy compositing MOV clips that you can put in just using the same 3D tracking. Now let's talk a little bit about this effect here. Now this is the exact same thing that happened when he touched the Lamborghini. Basically this kind of tie-dye texture gets painted all across here. Now there's a few theories I have for what this could be. This could just be using some complex tracking and masking. And if you look at the instances where they do use this effect, do it on surfaces that are easy to recreate in 3D. So obviously pool table is just a plane which you can create. And then at the beginning here with the Lamborghini, you can find tons of different Lamborghini models out there if you wanted to actually track the model over top of a real one, and then maybe just have this animated layer, change some blending modes and get it to project onto just the Lamborghini. So we'll talk over some of that more. That sounds confusing, but like I said, that's more for the step-by-step part of this tutorial. We have a lot going down in this scene in particular. A lot of fire, which we'll talk about a lot throughout this tutorial on how we can composite those in, track those in, and a lot of the other elements we've been speaking of just kind of aimlessly flying around. So let's go ahead and get right into the tutorial part. This was a nice, simple little breakdown. A lot of what happened through the video is very reoccurring, so we're going to break it down and we're going to show you guys exactly how you can recreate some of these effects. Okay guys, and here we are in After Effects. So in that ASAP video I talked about where we did the breakdown tutorial, what I did there was I just retraced my steps in the breakdown and we started with the very last thing I talked about first. In this video we're going to do a little bit different. I'm just going to start with the easiest stuff and work our way up to the hardest stuff. So let's start in with some Adobe Premiere work. Then we'll go into After Effects, we'll talk about some tracking, we'll talk about compositing in some things like fire, and then we'll go into the 3D stuff where we're matching in like furniture, the glassware, the water. I also just want to give a quick mention as to what softwares we'll be using to recreate a lot of the stuff and some other options you guys may have if you do want to follow along with a different software. So for the easier stuff, like I said, we will use Adobe Premiere, Adobe After Effects, and then we will use Cinema 4D with After Effects. Now, if you guys don't have C4D, I just want to point out that I heard that they have a monthly subscription now. So before you had to purchase it all the way and it was kind of expensive. Now I heard that they do have a monthly subscription. So if I find any links for that, that'll be below. If you guys don't want to spend any money, Blender is a great 3D software which you can use to do a lot of the stuff we'll be showing in here. 3ds Max is a great software, and a lot of those have plugins similar to the plugins I'll be using. Like for example, I'm using Turbulence FD to make the fire simulations. Something like 3ds Max has something called Fume Effects, which is very similar to that. So alright guys, so starting off with a black and white look, pretty easy to do. Make sure that you're starting off in your color workspace here within Adobe Premiere so that we can get our little Lumetri panels on our right. We're going to bring in some clips. I'm going to select it and we'll go to our basic correction first. I'm just going to do a little bit of color correction. I'll make it a tiny bit brighter. I'll add some contrast, get some nice cinematic look in there. I'll also probably bump the highlights a tiny bit, and that's starting to look pretty good. You can also play around with the shadows and just see how everything is working together. So now let's go over to our creative tab here, and a lot of you may not know, but there's actually a lot of black and white LUTs built into Adobe Premiere throughout your creative panel. So just click on this drop down and then go down to the ends and these LUTs that are built in, and you want to find these Noir LUTs. So right here you have Noir 1965, HDR, LDR. This is basically high dynamic range, low dynamic range. If you're shooting like a panoramic on an iPhone, that's what low dynamic range would really be. And then you have some other little presets. I'm going to go with the 1965 look, and you'll see that that does a really great job at adding this nice smooth black and white going on there. And now you can hop back into your basic correction and you can mess around with this to see what it looks like. Of course, if you want, you can bump bump away the contrast, have a little bit more gray instead of black and white, or you can just go over back to creative and you can take this little faded film aspect here, bump that up, and you'll see that the blacks kind of get washed out a bit. On the flip side, if you put that back to 0, you can do that through curves as well. If you just grab the bottom and just kind of raise that. And what I like about these Noir LUTs, it has this nice film stock look where it gives you this kind of nice natural looking stock grain on everything, which is really great. So easy as that, that's how we can create our black and white look. Okay guys, so I showed you our basics on how to get the color, the black and white look. The last thing I want to mention is if you are in that creative tab, you can lower and raise the intensity if you want to kind of get a mix of black and white and color. But other than that, let's now hop into After Effects and we'll show you the basis of the tracking of our footage. And that knowledge of the 3D tracking is going to be the support beams, the structure of a lot of the other stuff, which we're going to talk about later on. So make sure you pay attention to this part in particular. You can do a lot just with this 3D tracking. So let's go ahead and grab some footage. I'm going to right click on our footage and I'm going to click replace with After Effects composition to bring that into After Effects. And it's very important what footage you select for this as well. You want to have something that's an easy track, smooth motion. You'll notice that in the Travis music video, they was taken basically all in one shot. They probably had the camera on a Steadicam rig and they basically just had a tracking shot all the way through for a lot of the music video, which gives a nice clean plate for the CGI, the VFX artist to go in and be able to track this stuff in and make some cool looking effects. So in here we have a similar shot where this was shot on a gimbal, nice and smooth, not a lot of shakiness. If it's too shaky, if it's too much motion blur, you're not going to get a good track. Now if the tracking in After Effects doesn't work well, for something like this it should, but if you do want to go with a more complex track, maybe changing perspective, doing a lot of other craziness, softwares like Buju are great for tracking. You also have Mocha, which is built into After Effects. That's a little bit more of a complex tracker, which is great. We're going to be using the default tracker which comes in After Effects because this is a good shot which we're able to use. And remember that tip I said about not having a lot of motion blur. Crank up your shutter speed a tiny bit just so you have that little bit of crispness. You don't want to have motion blur because it'll be hard for the computer to track with a lot of motion blur. So let's go ahead and get started. So you notice this is in a composition. So if we normally right clicked and we went to track, this is going to be grayed out. So we need to go and pop this into a layer just by double clicking on it. And then we can go ahead and select the places we want. So I'll select the layer, Control-Shift-D to split it. I'm also just going to bring this back into the composition we had by just dragging this to the beginning of the timeline. Control-C to copy, hop back in the comp, Control-V to paste. If your footage is already just in a layer, you won't have to do that where you have to go and pull it like that. But if you do have a composition, it's good to know that knowledge of how to be able to set up the track. So now what we can do is right click on our footage, go to track and stabilize, and then go to track camera. And After Effects is going to go in here and track everything. Make sure that everything is fit to the comp. Alright guys, so our track went through, camera is being solved. You're about to see a lot of our track points pop up in just a second. So let's go ahead and just select our 3D camera tracker with our layer selected and our effect controls. And now you'll see all these little track points. And if we slide along here, you'll see how good of a job that the After Effects camera has done in creating those track points and doing a good job at actually analyzing our footage. So now what we can do is head back up to your effect controls and just click create camera. And if for any reason you click away doing something else and you don't see these track points, all you need to do is go back up to your effect controls and just select it and you'll see everything come back. And the reason why we added that 3D camera in there, because now if we add any 3D objects into this scene, the 3D object will automatically follow that 3D camera in the 3D space. For example, if I just use element 3D, add a little solid here, and I'm going very fast just to do this as a quick little example. We'll go into the more of the details of what you can do later. So I'll just drop one of these little icon models in here from Element 3D, and then we'll press play, and you'll see because of that After Effects camera, it's now tracked within 3D space, which is pretty cool. So now we can use this to composite in fire and it'll be properly tracked. We can use this to composite in maybe that glassware that's flying around. We can do this with a lot of different things. So let's start off with compositing in some fire. This will be our beginner part of using the 3D camera tracker, compositing stuff in, and then we'll work our way up to adding in more complex things and then adding in the simulations. So what I recommend for the fire, I am going to show you how to create your own simulated fire later on, or if you have something like Red Giant Particular, you can do that within After Effects. But for the fire, I recommend you just find an online pack where there's a bunch of fire you can use and just worry about the compositing. Alright guys, so I'll leave some options down below of places where you can find some packs which give you some fire elements. Another great website I like to use is footagecrate.com. This is 100% not sponsored. I just like to shout them out because they do have some really great stuff that you can look into. So check it out, go find whatever assets you're trying to composite in, download some of these fire things. Alright, so I imported some assets here which we can use, some fire. Now what we're going to do is, like I said, if you drag something in here with that 3D camera, if it's a 3D object, it's automatically going to be floating in 3D space. But if we want to composite a specific asset into the scene, like for example fire, then what we're going to do is we're actually going to click on our footage again. We're going to go up to our effect controls here in the top left, and we're going to select our 3D camera tracker, and we're going to use this little bullseye to actually select the exact position where we'd like to composite in this fire. Let's maybe try and add some ground fire. So we'll right click on this position and we'll click create solid. Now we have this track solid here which we can reposition, and we'll change that later, but for now what you want to do is right click on that track solid and just pre-compose it, and then we'll just name this fire 1 and click OK. And then you can double click on that pre-composition and just delete the actual solid out of it so that we have blank space there. And also, before you add the fire into here, go up to composition settings, and just make sure that this isn't something too small. Sometimes if you do create a solid, depending on the track, the size might be a little bit too small, so bump up the resolution if you do need to. And once you've done that, we can hop over to our project bin here, grab any of these assets that we're trying to composite in, like some of this fire. You can resize and scale that however you need to, and then we'll just pop back here into our actual composition, and you'll see what that's looking like. So we need to change the orientation of this fire because it's pretty flat right now. So we'll just go into our settings by opening up our transform options like this, and we'll see that we actually have our orientation. We can face that forward like that, and if we press play, and you'll see if I scrub along here, it should be properly tracked. Now, what we're going to do is I'll try and move this over, and I'm actually going to select it. I'm going to click toggle switches and modes so I can see our blending modes here. I'm going to put that on something that makes it look a little bit more actually blended in with the scene. So you can go with something like screen, lighten, add, whatever works for you and the scene itself. Of course, you can use your orientation, X, Y, and Z rotations if you want to composite that in better. Now, this scene might not be the best for fire because there's a lot of people walking in here. Of course, with the black and white effect, adding color correction and blending everything together at the end, you'll get a nicer look as a whole. Now, to actually make this text affected by our 3D camera tracker, all you need to do is click toggle switches and modes down here in the bottom left, and then you'll see this little switch here which enables it into a 3D layer. So we can go ahead and find the text that we have here, go ahead and enable this little 3D cube switch, and also you'll need to turn off this collapse transformation switch as well. You can grab it by any of the axes, you can move it in Z position, etc, etc, do whatever you'd like with it. If you'd like to paste it on the walls, what you can do is you can actually go into your transform. You can maybe change around your X rotation and your orientation. Try and just eyeball it to where it should be and how it should line up. Or you can use that trick I just showed you with compositing in the fire. Alright guys, now let me show you this cool little animated texture thing that they got going on here. They showed it at the beginning where he hit the Lamborghini, and you'll see it just kind of grows over. If you're just placing it on something like a plane, like when he goes and he hits the pool table just like that, then what you can do is you can actually just pop back into After Effects. Let's go over to the scene where we already have our 3D camera tracker, and I literally just went on Google and I just found some tie-dye textures. Right click, save that image. Since we already have our 3D camera tracker set up earlier in the tutorial, we can just click toggle switches and modes and make this tie-dye a 3D layer. We can open up the options for it, and we can actually change the orientation, grab this Z position, and we'll try and line it up with the wall as best as possible. So we'll just take the edges of that, I'll grow it across this entire wall like that, and I'll even add a little tint effect since this is going to be in black and white at the end anyway. So we'll make it black and white, and if we play, you'll see that it's automatically already tracked onto the wall because it's a 3D object. We did the 3D camera tracking. So now all you need to do is just create a mask and make this blend in. You can even click toggle switches and modes, and where right here in this mode drop down, you can change around the blending mode to maybe add, lighten, screen, whatever kind of look you're really going for. We'll play that through, looking pretty cool. And then in terms of the mask, just as an example, let's just look up a linear wipe. If we play through, here's what that's looking like so far. And you can literally just feather it like that. So we'll play that. And there you go. That texture just grows in just like that. Of course, changing around the blending modes, you can actually get some really cool looks with this type of editing. And if you don't want it to be a linear white, maybe you're trying to make it fade into one specific part of the video, or maybe you're trying to do some more complex masking like on a Lamborghini or car or whatever it is, then we can delete the linear white and we can literally just create our own mask. Open up those mask options and just bump up the feather a bit. And then we can keyframe our mask path, move along, and then we can just grab our mask and just make sure that this covers everything that we want and grows however we would like. For the actual tie-dye, you can even just look up brightness and contrast in your color correction. Drop that on there. Maybe add some contrast to see the blacks more. Alright guys, so now let's ramp it up a bit and we're going to show you how we can composite in some 3D glassware like in the original music video. So I'm going to show you a beginning starter way using Element 3D in After Effects, and then I'm going to show you how to do it within Cinema 4D. So first off, where we need to start is actually finding some 3D models to be able to manipulate within the scene. So we need to find some glassware models or furniture or whatever it is you want to create. Either way, I'm going to look up 3D glassware model, and then we have some options here. Hop onto Turbo Squid and of course link down below, and we're going to go over to price and just check out what they have for free. So we have some nice little wine glasses here. You want to either find an OBJ or a C4D format if you are going to do this Element 3D version. If not, you can go for something like an FBX or try and find the specific project file for the actual 3D software that you are using. But either way, let's just try it with this wine glass here for now. Alright guys, so back within After Effects, we'll show you first with Element 3D, then we'll show you with C4D, and then we'll build up to the simulation stuff from Cinema 4D. But just for doing these little objects flying around, After Effects Element 3D is a great and easy way to be able to pull this off. So let me show you exactly how we can do that. We already have our glassware models from Turbo Squid. What we want to do is we're going to use the same exact scene here. We already have everything 3D tracked. So if you need the 3D track info again, just rewind the video. We'll start off by right clicking in this gray space and going to new and then going to solid. You can also just go to layer, new, solid if you have a lot of layers in here and it's hard to see. We're going to name this wine glass and click OK. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our effects and presets up here, and we're going to search for the element plugin and then place that onto our solid. Go up to the effect controls and click scene setup to fire up element. Now in this menu, we're going to go up to import in the top left, and we're going to go ahead and find those 3D objects that we just downloaded from Turbo Squid, and we're going to also check use auto normals for this and click OK. And then once that fires up, just select this here, and we're just going to click normalize size. All right, looking good. Now we just need to add some sort of a glass material onto this. Now there's a few different ways. You may want to Google how to make a glass material depending on which 3D software you are using. Like I said, we'll do it in Cinema 4D after this. But if you are using Element 3D, it comes with these preset little physical textures here. You can just grab a glass material and drop it there. Now there's a few things we need to do. This isn't just yet see-through. So what you can do is open up these options here to see the material and just select the material. Click over here on this little advanced tab, this little gear. You'll want to change the blend mode from normal to add. And now you'll see we have this nice specular where we can see through this image. So let's keep adding onto this. Now the next big thing that you want to do, which can add a lot to the look of this, is you can add an environment by just clicking here. You actually have a lot that come with Element 3D. If you just click and just load from a file, it'll open up your Video Copilot folder, and you can look through all these different HDRI images. HDRI images are basically high dynamic range panoramic images that simulate an environment's lighting, coloring to be able to place on that 3D model. So I'm going to leave some links below on different ways you can create your own HDRI images to be able to load in. We'll speak a little bit of that more when it comes to Cinema 4D, but that's something that's really good to know in the future because that really is the basis between creating realistic looks for 3D and blending it with real life footage. I'll leave a link below to a product on Amazon which allows you to just click a button and it'll create an HDRI for you. I'll also leave a link to a tutorial below on how to do it just with the DSLR. But you can load any of these in and you'll see that it'll reflect. The reflection will match the HDRI image that you actually load in. So if you want the garden here, and then of course you can change around these UVs to change how the reflection is. Now we're going to skip on that for now. You can actually select the Element 3D layer here and go to custom layers, and then you can go to custom texture maps. And here where it says layer 1, we can actually just click the drop down and then select our footage, which we have in there, this C0371 or whatever your footage is named. And then we can go back to scene setup. We can click on environment again, and then we can actually load in this custom layer, which is just our normal footage. Now this may kind of get grayed out click OK. But you'll see now that everything is, now it's actually matching the surroundings to an extent. I'm sure it doesn't match the full dynamic range, and that's why it's good to know how to create an HDRI yourself. It does give you a great starting point in terms of doing something simple like this. Let's go down to where it says render settings, and we can actually go over to our lighting tab. And here you can choose from this drop down just a little preset of different lighting. Now, since we have this environment loaded in, and since we are going to make this all black and white, this isn't going to be that big of a change. But if you do want to kind of manipulate a specific reflection going on in there, then these presets are good. And if you're working on other Element 3D stuff, make sure you look into that. Next, you want to go over to ambient occlusion. You can enable that and just turn on ray tracing. That'll just create some realistic looking shadows. And since we already have our 3D camera here, if we just press play, you'll see this is already floating within 3D space. It's all tracked, it's good to go. So all we really need to do is just add some actual animations, like it's spinning around slowly. So to do that, what we can do is select the element layer again, go up to your world transform, open up the world rotation here, and then you can use any of these values to change anything you'd like. So let's start at the beginning. Let's go ahead and just click and drag down to keyframe all of this. And then we'll drag a bit. And once this gets to around where our camera is now, let's go ahead and just maybe make this spin a bit. So now if we rewind a bit and we play that through, we have this slow little rotation which is going on, and you guys can create some really cool stuff in general just with these little control points. You'll see that this glass material is pretty good. You get some distortion in there. This bottom part here looks pretty realistic in general. There is some kind of fringing on the material itself. That probably comes down to the actual model you go for. If it's low poly, if there's not a lot of segments, it may start to look a little bit like that. That's the benefit of going into a 3D software and being able to control a lot more than in Element 3D. So we'll show you some more stuff. So if you want, go ahead and rewind the steps and just keep repeating that to add multiple elements into this. And just like that, we have a pretty cool floating cup look. We have some cool little animations. Now our workflow is going to change a bit. We're going to hop into Cinema 4D. I'm going to show you a lot more tips in regards to the 3D workflow. We're going to bring in our tracking information from After Effects, and then we're going to create some cool simulations after that. For that, let's start within After Effects, and we can hide all this for now and not worry about that. What we really want to do is Control-C to copy our 3D camera tracker and our footage that we want. I'm just going to paste that into a new composition. Click this button here in your project bin. I'm going to make that around 2.12 seconds. That's the duration of this clip actually. And same exact resolution. Click OK. And then Control-V just to paste that in there so that we have a clean composition. And now we're going to export that tracking info to bring it into Cinema 4D. So go up to File, Export, and then click Maxon Cinema 4D Exporter. And it's going to say 2D layers are fine. These will not be exported. That is fine for now. We can click OK. Choose the location where you'd like to save this. Now we can fire up Cinema 4D and then open up that project file that we just saved within After Effects. Within Cinema 4D, you just want to click File, Open, and then go to wherever you just saved and exported that C4D project file from After Effects. You're going to have this null here, which you can just open, and you're going to have your 3D camera tracker from After Effects here. So if we play that out, you'll see it's just following along the same tracking info that we've already tracked. If you guys want a better visual representation of that, if you actually click off this little selector for the camera, you can see the exact path in a kind of like pulled away 3D space of what this camera is really doing, which is super cool. And you'll see this keyframe here is a little bit messed up. It kind of pops off path for some reason. If you want, you can try and fix that just like that. So let's go ahead and switch to our camera view just by clicking this little switch here, and we'll change to the camera's perspective. Back up a tiny bit. Let's go ahead and first add our cup in. So we'll click File, Merge Objects. All right, so we have our wine cup in here, and this is sort of the tricky part. This is trying to get the 3D object to line up with the camera. You can just use these little axes here. You can pop off the camera view and just try and view as easy as possible what's going on with this. Let's also select our cup here, and we're gonna go to coordinates and just maybe make these all 5 so it's a little bit bigger, and then switch back to the camera view. To actually make this a lot bigger, let's make this 20 each, and I think that should be easier. And we'll have the cup kind of floating around here. So when we press play, our camera is going to pass by the cup like that. And we'll fix up the animation a little bit. We just want to set this up so we know that what we're doing is going to be changing around. So now we can click File, Save, and we want to see what this will look like within After Effects with the actual footage. Of course, you can make a background here and actually load in kind of like a screenshot of the video file as a nice reference, but it's easy just to have After Effects open at the same time. You can literally open up the same file save location for where you exported out the C4D file. We can drag that into After Effects just like that, and then we can drag that C4D file just as a layer over top here, and this will load in. You now see these kind of C4D lines going on. And if we scroll through a bit, here's the cup that we just added within Cinema 4D. So if we hop back into C4D, it's kind of like a dynamic link. We grab this cup and maybe we change the position of it. We click File, Save. If you go back into After Effects, you'll see now this position will change. So anything we do within C4D will change in After Effects. And this is just a reference. We're going to render out the frames later in After Effects. So before we go in and animate a little bit of spinning on this cup, what I'm going to do is just pop off our camera view. I'm going to hold Alt, rotate the camera, and then use these controls here just to zoom into our actual cup. And I'm going to design the look of the cup within C4D. So if you're using the physical renderer, you can just look up how to make a glass material. I'm pretty sure there's even a default glass material that you can load in specific C4Ds. So load material preset, prime, materials, glass. You'll see they actually have a few like options here. So if you want, just look up how to make glass in C4D, use any of those presets. I'm going to be using Octane to do this and show you a few other tools, because the reason why I want to show you how to do it in different 3D softwares is to show you that if you do it within different 3D softwares, you have a wider range of tools you can use in the process as a whole. So what I'll do is I'll go to plugins. I'm going to load up C4D Octane, which is basically just going to give us this live viewer, some lighting tools, some HDRI tools, and a lot of other nice stuff, which is going to help in the process. So I'll snap that onto here. I'll fire up Octane. So I'm going to make our Octane glass material. I'm going to click Create here. I'm going to go to Shader, C4D Octane, Octane Material. I'll double click on that. I'll change the material type from diffuse to specular. And we already have this nice kind of glossy, which we can drop on there. And here's what that's looking like. And you guys can go through, there's so many different glass tutorials if you want the ins and outs of really customizing it. I mean, you can go to the roughness, you can add a little bit of more frosted glass if you want. I'm not really going to go into the ins and outs of really designing the glass look. There's so many different tutorials out there. I just want to show you as a whole what we can really do. We can add some lighting here. So if we zoom in, we can go to Objects, Lights, Octane Area Light. Or if you are just using the normal physical renderer, you can just add your own lighting in here. And we're just rotating this and just placing it above our light. And you'll see how our reflection is going to look there. We can also go up to Objects and go to HDRI Environment. So very similar to adding that environment in Element 3D. And with this HDRI environment, you can actually click the HDRI environment tag there. And you'll see an image texture is loaded in. You can just click these three dots right here, and you can actually load in any HDRI you want. You can go back to the Video Copilot folder, wherever you have it saved, find where those HDRIs are, and actually load straight from there. Or if you have any HDRI packs, or if you make your own HDRI on set, on the spot, if you want the exact same lighting, following the tutorials that are in the description down below, you can load that in and have the exact same lighting setup all ready to go. So just to show you, I'll load some kind of HDRI in here just to show you the difference. Just go up to Settings in Octane, and you can just turn off this alpha channel here, and you'll still have the reflectance and everything happening to the cup, but without that actual background. Go ahead and make your adjustments, change around the look based off those tips which I just gave you. Let me now show you how to create the animation of it kind of floating through the sky within Cinema 4D. All you need to do is go to the beginning here. We're going to actually click on auto keyframing, this red button right here. We'll drag to where we pass up the cup, maybe around right there. And then we can actually select the cup object and then rotate it however we would like and move it around a tiny bit. You'll see with the auto keyframes turned on, it automatically is going to be rotating just like this. It's also move it a little bit towards the camera and you'll get something like this. Now you guys will see we have our floating animation custom made within C4D. It has this nice kind of swiveling around. And the great thing about this is you won't have to keep loading in element layers. You can just keep merging in objects, keep creating those animations and just putting it within this view of the 3D camera we already have. So one more thing, let's just click on this Octane light tag here. We're going to go up to visibility and we'll just turn off the camera visibility so we don't see that in the render, but we're still getting the light effect of it. So here's what this is looking like so far. Oh, and make sure before you do that, you turn off auto keyframes. So turn off auto keyframes, select your light, Go to visibility and turn off the camera visibility. File, save. Let's check what that looks like in After Effects. So we'll hop back in here. We'll drag along. And you're not seeing the Octane texture just because it's not going to display that since it is an actual plugin. But you will see the rotation that we did create from the animation. All right, so if you're confused with any of that, just rewind. I know a lot of this may be new information to you guys. Rewind, follow those steps again. I'm going to rewind myself, and I'm just going to put some more floating cups in here and just kind of make a crazy 3D scene. Let's go and open up our Octane live viewer window, or if you guys don't have Octane, it's fine. You can just render it out with the standard renderer. But if you do, you can go into your Octane rendering settings and you can change it however you'd like. If there's a little bit of these fireflies where it looks a little scratchy like that, you're going to want to bump up these samples, and that'll fix that issue. You can also change it from direct lighting to something like PMC or path tracing. Let's click on this button here to open up our render settings. If you don't have Octane, if you just added the glass model and followed along with all the other steps I've been showing you guys, you can just use the standard or the physical render. If you did follow along with Octane, then you can use the Octane renderer here. Output, this should be the same as your actual project settings since we did load in the 3D camera. You just want to make sure that the frame range says all frames for this. Under save, what you want to do here is we'll click these three dots. You're going to want to make your own folder in a place where you can remember. So right click, go to new folder, and I'll just name this 3D cups render. Let's double click into that folder and we'll just name it cups for the file names. Click save, and exporting as TIFF files is fine. You're going to want to make sure alpha channel is checked as well in the render settings. So check that. Now we can click render to picture viewer. And with that alpha channel checked in the render picture viewer, you might see your HDRI environment, but when we actually go and see what it's rendering out, you'll see that this is transparent here. You can also render out as a PNG if you don't want to do it as a TIFF. That should work fine as well. But you'll see if we just drag any of these into After Effects, and I'm only showing what we just rendered out, here's what that's going to look like. So we'll let that full animation render out, we'll import it as footage, and then you'll see exactly what we created. Alright guys, our render finished up. We have all of our images for the cup animation that we created. Let's go ahead and bring this into After Effects and then place it over our scene, and then we'll add the color grade and we're good to go on that. So first off, what you want to do, hop over to your project bin here with everything create with our composition in After Effects we've been working on up. We're going to go and find the folder where we rendered everything out to. You're going to right click in your project bin and go to import and then click multiple files. And then you're just going to want to navigate to the folder where you exported all of those cup renders or whatever it is you're rendering out in. Select the first frame, import as footage, and just click import and then click OK and then done. Then you can just grab this clip that's now in your project bin and overlay it in your project. Since we did our tracking within After Effects, we brought in the camera, everything will be good to go and is now within After Effects. So the reason why I'm showing you how to do it within C4D is just to give you guys some more depth and control over what you are putting in terms of the lighting, in terms of HDRIs, if you want to really buff it up. So now that we've spoken on that, let's move into some of the simulation stuff. We're going to start with the Thanos disintegration effect. So if we take a look at the disintegration effect that goes on in the actual music video, and you'll see that it's a little bit different from the disintegration effect from the Avengers movie. It's not really wiping people from the scene. It's kind of just emitting some particles coming off of their body, kind of like dust is flying off of. Here's another example of that. You'll see it's kind of just pulling away from the back. So method one, let me show you guys where you can get some of these awesome clips. So I mentioned Footage Crate before. Not only do they have a lot of water, dust simulations like we've been talking about throughout this video, but they even have some dust sprites here, which you can download 100% for free, and you can load that into Particular and use Particular to work with these little renders that they've already created. Footage Crate, again, has a YouTube channel where they show you how they use these assets. They have their own little motion control rig, so you can do this with a moving person and disintegrate them. They show a lot of the process, whether it's being on set, even some of the 3D stuff behind the scenes. So check this out, link down below. Many people have made tutorials on this effect. A lot of people use Particular for this. I know that Cinecom has made a tutorial on how to do this without any plugins, and that's a great tutorial. They show some really great behind the scenes. There are a few other methods online on creating this shatter effect, and we're also going to try and aim to make the look similar to the Travis music video. We don't want anything to wipe away. We're not going to be using any green screen shots over top of a normal background. But check out everything I mentioned below if you want the full step-by-steps just for this. So what I'm going to do to start is I want this shatter to only affect my arm. So I'm just going to make a rough mask using our pen tool. I'm also going to select the clip and click Control D to duplicate that. So now I can just draw a rough little mask here. Alright, so that is looking fine. I'm also going to click M on that layer, right click that mask, and just do a rough little track mask so I can get as many little keyframes in here as possible. Alright, so with that rough track complete, this will get the job done for what we are trying to show. Now once you have that isolated subject, what you really need to do is use some built-in plugins to create this shattering effect, to create these emitted particles flying away from our subject. Now there's two methods that I found that work for this. The first being this plugin called CC Scatterize, and like I said, this is built into After Effects. Drop that on your duplicated clip, and then it's as simple as just animating this little slider here in your effect controls. So you can go to the beginning, keyframe the scatter, and you'll get something like this. Now I don't really like how this looks because I think that it's a little bit too fine print. So we're going to look up shatter in our effects and presets, and it's under simulation. Drag that onto our duplicated clip here, and you'll see it gives you this kind of target with a lot of bricks going on here. It looks a little bit confusing at first, but follow along, it's pretty easy to set up. So what we're going to do is under shatter, you can mess around with your shape. I think we can change this around later once we actually start viewing the render. I like going with something like either rhombi, glass. You can also set this extrusion depth to 0, just like that. Next, what you want to do is open up force 1. And basically this is the extent to how far we're going to go in depth with this, so don't worry if it's starting to look too confusing. Next, you want to open up your force 1 options and your physics options, and we're going to be only working through these little options here. So if it's a little too confusing, it's really not that bad. We're just going to change around a few things. So you're going to want to grab your position and place it wherever you'd like the animation to start. So I'll just place it around here. I'm also going to grab my origin, place it down by my forearm, and that's looking fine so far. So the only thing we really need to keyframe is our position and our radius. I also put the strength at 1. This is really going to depend on the animation length, how much you want the animation to really distort based off your clip. We're going to move along to how far we want this animation to last, and then I'm actually going to click on the bullseye for my position and now just move it up past my fingers. I'm also going to put the radius from 0 to 1.8 around this position, and now you'll see everything start to really come to life. And there you go. That's basically a rough little show of how to do it just with scatter. It obviously doesn't look as good because we're using a free built-in plugin. Here's some quick little tricks on how to make this look a little bit better. So one thing you can do once you have the animation all down, you can mess around with your pattern a bit. I also like the carpenter's wheel preset as well because it makes it a little bit more kind of feathery. You can also select your duplication, duplicate that again, so Control D, and now you can change the shape on that second duplication. So you can get a mixture of some particles which are kind of happening around. So you can put that one on rhombi. Now another thing you can do, and this is directly from 𝐶ineComm's tutorial, like I said, if you want their full step-by-step, check that out. It's a great video. It goes a little bit more in depth than this quick little recreation that I'm doing. I know 𝐶ineComm, they show you an extra little step here where you can add in some dust, which basically just adds a lot more depth into this as a whole and makes it look a lot more accurate. So here's with the dust layer added, just following 𝐶ineComm's tutorial, and of course you can add the black and white over everything. Let's now move into Particular, which is going to be a great tool that you guys should pick up in terms of being able to create your own custom particles like this using those sprites that I mentioned from Footage Crate. Alright guys, now method 3, let's try this out with Particular. So if you do have the Particular plugin, if you don't, info down below in the description. But you want to right click down here, go to New Solid, and we're going to name this Particular. Now search for the particular effect within your effects and presets and just drop that onto your solid. Now within here, what we're going to do is let's start in rendering at the bottom, and we can change this if you want to use your GPU to make it a little bit faster. Like I said, with GPU acceleration, this can be a huge benefit for this. You can change that on if you'd like. Let's also go down to motion blur, and we can go ahead and change that to be on. Next, what we want to do, let's go up to the emitter options right here. We're going to change the emitter type from point to layer. Now scrolling down, let's go to our layer emitter. We can change our layer to our actual Travis Tut Clips footage that we have in here. Now before you do that, you're going to want to click toggle switches and modes and just enable it to be a 3D layer. And this is of course the duplication we had with our mask that we created earlier. So make that a 3D layer. Now head back up to your particular options, select that layer. So it's in layer number 8. Layer sampling, particle birth time is fine. Now let's go down into particle. Now for our particle type, you can either choose a sprite or a cloudlet. And if we just zoom over, you'll see that this is starting to show what's actually happening. So to see a little bit better, let's actually scroll all the way up here and you'll see our particle count here. Let's just bump this up. So keep dragging along until you can actually see what's going on. Also, to actually get everything within our mask where it says our layer emitter, just change your source to effects and masks and everything will just be popped into here. So let's keep bumping that up. Great thing about this plugin, there's tons more customization options that you do have. You can even go down here to the size and raise that a tiny bit if you want. And you'll see it gets kind of more feathered. Let's go over to our size random, open that up, and we'll just bump that up so we can get a nice kind of mix of small and large particles. So now we're getting that more feathered particle look that is actually in the original music video. So we'll scroll along a little bit and you'll be able to see what's really going on. We'll open up our physics section here. And this is fine, it's on air, gravity 0. Let's open up the air and we're just gonna add a little bit of wind pushing this up. So just take the wind Y and just kind of make that in the negative. Now as we go along, you'll see that everything is now just being pushed up. Playing around with these options here, there's a lot you really can do. You can bump your velocity up, you can add rotation. Just look through a lot of these options. You guys can really customize your own looks for whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Like I said, you can also use a sprite if we go back to our particle here instead of a cloudlet. And that allows you to actually load in any custom shape for the particles that are being emitted. And if you click presets, you'll see they have a bunch of them. You can go all the way to the bottom. You can even use some of these water drop sprites like how they used in the music video. So for example, this instance right here where you see these are actually little drops of water, that could just be changing that particle type to use sprites. And of course with the color grade, the mixing, and then using those camera controls to actually make those fade into focus. So let's actually just add a tint effect onto here. If we were to make these all water particles, you can even load in custom sprites like the one that is available on Footage Crate, link down below if you want to download that. Like I said, those are free. And then under our particle section, once more, you can open up the size over life and you can choose a little preset for what you want it to do. If you want it to fade out over time, etc., etc. So you really have all the options within here. Mess around with it. Like I said, customize your own look. If you want the water particles, if you want dust, if you want these cloudlets, so it's kind of pulling away from your actual layer. Particular is a great tool for that. So let's go ahead and file save that. All right, guys, so we showed you where to find assets online if you just want to download some stuff. We showed you with Particular. If you want to make fire or water within Particular, I'm just going to link you guys to this tutorial here, because this is 30 minutes. It shows some amazing steps on creating really realistic water using Particular as well as motion path, all that in between. So this can give you a lot of great information. You can also create fire, of course, within Particular. I want to get right into Cinema 4D and show you some other cool things we can do regarding simulation. Hop into Cinema 4D. We're going to use this plugin called RealFlow, and I want to show you this because you can do a lot of things. Let's actually try and mix some dynamics into there and try and fill up one of these floating wine glasses with our RealFlow water. So let's see what we can do in C4D. Merge in our same wine glass model that we have here, and let's actually use these controls just to see what we're doing and working with. Now I'll leave links below if you want to look into RealFlow. If you do get it and install it, it'll be built into Cinema 4D. You can just click scene and everything will load already in for you, and now we can start customizing. So first, let's go ahead and create a spline, and this is going to serve as the path for our simulated water. So you'll see you have this option here, freehand draw spline. This is next to your little add cube objects. Just go ahead and select that. And you're going to click your middle mouse button to actually switch your views, and you'll want to use your top view here. So I'm just going to draw a rough little spiral that kind of ends in the middle by the cup, like that. And then I can use my mouse wheel. Let's just go back to our normal view. That's looking okay. We'll select our spine and our objects up here. And I'm going to come down here to our coordinates tab. I'm actually just going to grab the Y and just raise that up. So here's what that is looking like so far. Now, some cool stuff about the splines is you can actually select, if we just grab our tool here to move around, you can select each little point of the spline and change it however you'd like. So you can grab it like this and change the path. Maybe you want one of these to kind of dip down. All right, guys, so now let's add in our emitter for this. So let's go ahead and select our scene. Let's go up to RealFlow's tab and go to emitters, and we can just make a circle emitter for now. So if I actually play this, you'll see all our little particles falling from that emitter. And what we're going to do is we're now going to set up the spline so that our particles will follow along the path of the spline. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to go up to RealFlow, go down to demons or daemons, however you pronounce it. I think it's demons. Select D spline, and it'll automatically pop into here. we can now select that D-spline object, go over to the spline tab. It'll say spline object here. We can grab our spline and just plug that into there. And you'll see these little red circles pop up. And this is basically just having little checkpoints around the spline, which we can now select, make smaller, make bigger, depending on the way that you want the particles to flow through it, if that makes sense. Go ahead and open up this little control tab right there. And you'll be able to actually click next and previous to select each of these. So let's select the first one here. And I'm actually going to grab the radius of this and just kind of make it a little bit smaller. I'll click next, and I'll make this one a bit smaller, but not too big, not too small. And I'll do that with the rest of these. I just want to make them a bit smaller. Let's grab our circular emitter, and we're actually going to position this so that it is starting right at the beginning of our first little ring right there. So let's rotate this, grab your rotation tool, and you want to point this arrow that you see there into the very first circle. Let's also grab our circular emitter, and we're just going to decrease the width and depth to make it kind of smaller and match this as well as we can. So now let's play that. You'll see it's spreading, but it's not following along our path yet. So what we need to do is let's go back and select our D-spline, and we're going to go over to our radial strength here in the spline tab, and let's put that all the way up to 5,000. And now press play. And now you're going to see that this is going to follow this path pretty well. And if you actually decrease this value, so let's maybe put it at like 1500, it'll follow the path, but it'll be a little bit more rough. The strength of how it sticks to that spline path will be a little bit less. So you'll see particles kind of twirl around each other. Some might actually get lost. The only problem is, depending on the spline that you have, you'll see that things are kind of going crazy here and falling off near the end part. So that's why we're going to crank it up to 5,000. But just to let you guys know, if you are going along a more simple path, then you can get away with kind of getting a little bit more of that flowing rotation that's going on. That's looking pretty cool. One last thing that I'd like to do is I'm going to move this around so that I'm trying to get the particles as best in the cup as I can. Another nice thing that you actually can do is you can set up those dynamics like I was talking about. So let's actually right click on our cup here. We can go down to RealFlow tags, and we can add in this collider tag. So now when we actually play out our animation, you'll see instead of falling right through the cup like it did before, it's actually going to start building up and overflowing within the cup, which is pretty cool. So you can add that kind of physics and dynamics into it. All right, so now let's go ahead and add in our mesher. So what we're going to do is let's go up to RealFlow, and you can just click mesher, and you'll see it creates an actual mesh of the path and the particles that we created. So this is actual physical geometry. All right, guys, so I fired up Octane. Of course, if you want, you can use any kind of renderer, third party or built in. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the same I showed you earlier. I'm going to create a new C4D Octane material, and I'm just going to basically make some specular materials. So let's go ahead and grab this little specular here. You can place it on the cup to get that kind of glass look, and then you can create another specular or even maybe a glossy texture if you want some sort of paint look. And now check this out. You can actually grab that red texture we made, apply it to here, and there you go. So you have a lot more customization using 3D softwares. Of course, there's benefits for everything. Like I said, if you want a faster, easier workflow, particular is great. If you don't want to pay any money, you can still do it with just the normal standard steps. Purpose of making this video is really just to show you there are different ways to do this. Now, with everything I've been talking about, I wouldn't recommend just copy and pasting the steps that I'm just showing. Since this video is showing tons of different things, I recommend that you guys take the thing that you like the most. Maybe you like the particular stuff, maybe you like the C4D stuff. Look into it, find some different settings, tweak, take time, spend hours tweaking the looks. When I'm trying to talk about all this different information, I'm not sitting there for as long as they did in the actual music video to recreate the stuff. But I do want to give you guys a great standing point, open the door for you, show you the steps on how you can get started, and then you can look up some other specific tutorials to get into the ins and outs and change different things that you may want to change. So to finish this all off, I'm going to add a little Octane camera here. And next what I'll do is I'll go to objects and I'll just add a little HDRI environment, maybe even add a little Octane daylight, just to show you guys how we can manipulate the light that is really being affected here. And if you don't want to keep it red, like I said, the specular texture, you can toss that on there, looking pretty cool on the actual liquid itself. We can also go to our camera tag here just by clicking there. We can go to our camera imager and enable that. We can also go to post-processing, and you can enable that if you want any sort of glow. There's not a lot of lights here, so it's probably just going to blow out the background. Now, I probably don't have enough time to actually render this out to get it out in time for the tutorial, but if you look down in the comments, I'm going to let this render after the tutorial is out, and I'll post a Vimeo link down below if you guys want to check out what this looks like. Also, if you rewind the video, you can take the tips I was giving you with taking an After Effects 3D camera, placing it in After Effects. You can put all of that into that tracked footage to literally create this sort of 3D camera tracked craziness moving around with these dynamics like I'm showing you in this. So there's a lot you can do with it. I know that so many of my viewers are Premiere and After Effects because for the past year, 2 years, that's what my channel's been all about. But I want to start implementing some things like these to show you guys that there's more things you can do out there. And then to leave you guys with a little bonus tip for tweaking the look of this finally, what I'm going to do is I'll select the specular texture, Control-C, Control-V just to paste that. Let's go into here and we're just going to make some cool kind of like oil slick looking texture for the liquid. So what I'll do is I'll go to this film layer right here, and I'm going to just bump up the float in the film IOR to try and get some nice looks. I'll also go to my roughness here, and I'll just bump the float up a tiny bit for that to get this kind of frosted glass look. Let's go back to film layer, and let's tweak that to get the actual coloring that we want. But applying that to the liquid, there you go. You get some interesting reflections on there. Maybe you want to apply it to the glass. Let's also just grab our Octane daylight just by selecting it. Grab our rotation tool, and I'll just rotate the sun and try and get some like sunset looks. I think that would be pretty sick. That'll bring more of the reflections and the colors out for us. You can also load custom LUTs in your camera imager for that Octane camera, by the way. Just click open custom LUT and then pull from any of your Adobe LUTs as well if you want to experiment with any different looks and colors. Alright guys, so I hope you did enjoy this tutorial. There was a lot of material in this, so in the description I'm going to leave a bunch of useful resources and links to help get you guys going on any of the specific things I've been talking about. Comment down below anything you'd like to see in the future from me, any music video you'd like me to break down, or any specific effect you want me to make a dedicated video about. Other than that guys, thank you so much for watching, thank you so much for supporting, and I'll see you guys in the next one.